Well, I would like to welcome everyone to the Hudson River School of Art and their Ice Age Origins webinar. I want to thank you for joining us this evening. This evening's topic is hosted by Robert and Johanna Titus. My name is Lauren Bohr. I'm the Education Coordinator for Public and Youth Programming here at Mohonk Preserve, and I'm going to be monitoring this webinar and facilitating it in any way. Before I formally introduce our presenters, just a few reminders for everyone attending this webinar. If you have any questions, you can always pop them in the chat. And we will try and answer them as we go along with a few pauses, or we can answer them at the end as well. This presentation, of course, is being recorded along with our chat conversation to share with our online presence that we have. We will also be posting this on our YouTube channel and with a link on our website as well. So again, please be mindful and respectful during our presentation. And we are all muted during this just to keep any of the distractions to a minimum for our evening. So it is with a great pleasure that I get to introduce our presenters, Robert and Johanna Titus. They are respectively retired professors of geology and biology. They are best known in the Catskills as popular science writers. I'm sure they'll talk more about their writing. Over the years, they have written for several regional magazines, including Catskill Life and Tri-County Historical Reviews. They currently write for local newspapers as well, the Mountain Eagle and the Columbia Paper. They are authors of 5 books on the Catskills and Hudson Valley geology. The Tituses are frequently invited to present PowerPoint lectures on their research and have been seen on television and heard on the radio, so all media. They have a Facebook page, the Catskill Geologist, if you'd like to follow, and a blog site, the catskillgeologist.com. I can post their blog and contact information in the chat for everyone. Without further ado, here are Robert and Johanna Titus presenting on the Hudson River Schools of Art and their Ice Age origins. So I will turn it over to the two of you.
Well, thank you, Lauren. We'd like to thank Lauren and thank the Mohonk Preserve for inviting us tonight. And this is just a page to show you the books that we've written. They are mostly available on Amazon, hopefully, and our Facebook page and our blog sites. And we'll put this up at the end too, so you can look at it if you'd like. Today, we'd like to introduce our latest book, which is the Hudson River Schools of Art and their Ice Age origins. So let's get right to it. Thomas Cole first arrived in the Catskills late in the summer of 1825, where he found a landscape that was mostly wilderness. Cole's first trip up the Hudson may have been influenced, even encouraged, by some of the people he lunched with near his studio space in New York City. He was part of a small group, first called the Bread and Cheese Club, then the Lunch Club, and finally the Sketch Club. And they met periodically beginning around 1822. They included several painters, along with writers from the group we recognize as our second school of art, the literary school, including James Fenimore Cooper and Washington Irving, who wrote the famous tale of Rip Van Winkle, published in 1819. Everyone knows the tale of Rip Van Winkle, but do you remember how Irving begins his tale? He says, "Whoever has made a voyage up the Hudson must remember the Catskill Mountains. Every change of season, every change of weather, indeed, every hour of the day produces some change in the magical hues and shapes of these mountains." Cole journeyed to the Catskills, where he sketched and painted that wilderness. He also produced 4 paintings based on Cooper's Last of the Mohicans, setting them, of course, in the Catskills. This is one of those 4. His paintings became a new interpretation of landscape on the world stage, a landscape untamed, sublime, and a new, distinctly American type of art, the Hudson River School of Art, was born. But he can be included in the literary school also, since he painted with words. He was a published poet. His poems are available in a book entitled The Poetry of Thomas Cole, published in 1972. Let me read just a tiny excerpt from his poem entitled A Painter. I know 'tis vain, ye mountains and ye woods, to strive to match your wild and wondrous hues. Ye rocks and lakes and ever-rolling floods, the gold cinctured eve, or morn begemmed with dews. Frederick Church became another leading figure in the Hudson River School. He was Thomas Cole's only student, belonging to the second generation of Hudson River School artists, and is also thought to have been the most successful. He specialized in very large canvases and painted wild scenes, not only in New York, but from locations around the world. Sanford Robinson Gifford grew up and lived in the city of Hudson within sight of the Catskills. He's well known for his paintings of Catskill clove. All three men were also very concerned with the conservation and protection of wild places. Our thesis is that this is the area, ours is the area where the Hudson River School of Art, early American literature of the Hudson Valley, and the art of landscape architecture, the three schools, came into existence to form our unique Hudson Valley culture. And that it was the glaciers, the geological processes of the most recent ice age, that are responsible. It's a rather extraordinary claim, and so requires extraordinary evidence. Robert will begin to provide some of that evidence.
Or at least I will try. Nope.
Arrows.
Arrows. Here we go. Tomorrow, when it's light out, I would like you to go outside and see where you live, possibly in a way that you've never seen it before. I'd like you to stand somewhere, hold your arm out, and turn yourself in your hand 360 degrees. Then I want you to point into the sky above you and imagine how high up there it is when you get to about 5,000 feet, about a mile up there. Turn the 360 degrees once again, point up above you once again, and understand that that was all ice, that you were, oh, terrific.
Why is it not plugged in?
To stand outside with 5,000 feet up into the sky and envision, I didn't say imagine, I said envision, the fact that that was once all ice.
There we go.
As far as you can see, all around you and 5,000 feet up into the sky, it was all ice. A great glacier expanded out of Labrador, moved to the south, crossed the Adirondack Mountains, and was funneled into the Hudson Valley. Some of the ice advanced to the bottom of the valley, and then the ice rose, and then the glacier swelled up and expanded to the very top of the Catskill Mountains, and then flowed out into those mountains. We want you to understand the magnitude of this ice age event. It was an astonishing thing.
Is that where you were?
There we go. That's the advance of the ice. Now, how can I demonstrate that? Remember, Johanna challenged me to come up with a scientific evidence for these utterly preposterous notions. In the 1820s, when the Ice Age was discovered, it must have been, how did they deal with it? When they went outside and looked into the sky, how did they deal with the idea that this had once been ice? Well, you're looking at some of the evidence from right here in the Catskills. It's the eastern shore of North Lake, and in the foreground is bedrock. But if you look carefully, you'll see it's been polished. It's even shiny. The sandstone there is almost shiny. And then there are scratches. scratches are from behind us and they expand off into the distance away from us. And every one of those scratches is parallel with all of the others. That's scientific evidence for the Ice Age, almost irrefutable evidence for the Ice Age. The only way we can imagine that such a thing could have come into existence is that if a glacier expanded from the Hudson Valley, flowed across the top of the wall of Manitou and into what is now North Lake, it would have dragged sand, it would have dragged cobbles and boulders, it would have polished that sandstone, and it would have gouged that sandstone with what we call glacial striations. Now, Johanna and I, decades ago, we spent a lot of time in the vicinity of North Lake and South Mountain. We hiked every trail, we bushwhacked the whole area, and whenever we found glacial striations, we had a compass with us, and we took the compass direction of those striations, and we converted that data. Science is all about data, isn't it? We converted that data into this map, and the arrows are summaries of where the glacial striations took us in the vicinity of South Mountain. There's a great black arrow on the far right that represents the north to south movement of the Hudson Valley Glacier. There are smaller arrows going up Catskill Clove, and then they turn to the northeast. They pass across where Catskill Falls is today, and they pass into the vicinity of South Lake, where other striations advancing from the east collide with this first set of striations. South Lake was scoured by the glacier. North Lake was scoured by the same different glacier. The big arrow, the black arrow, is the Hudson Valley Glacier. And look what it did. It came down the Hudson Valley and it eroded about a third of a mile of bedrock off of what is today the Wall of Manitou, the Catskill front. The glacier moving down the Hudson Valley created this 10-mile long, straight as an arrow, northeast to southwest, trending wall of rock that we call the Eastern Catskill Mountains. Well, remember, this lecture is about art, and this is the Catskill front, but it's not a photograph. It is a painting. It was done by Thomas Cole, 1843, at a location only a couple of city blocks from Cedar Grove, where he at the time was living. This is one of his favorite points for sketching and for painting, and he did about a dozen paintings of this sort from that spot. One of our friends, Dan Peck from Vassar College, has recently published a book about these paintings. But this is the point that we're trying to get across tonight. That painting could not have been done if it had not been for the glacier that filled the Hudson Valley and carved the Wall of Manitou. The glacier and the art cannot be pulled apart. The glacier created the landscape, and Thomas Cole painted that landscape. Well, we're going to go back to what is the north rim of Catskill Clove, and there's three medium-sized arrows that define the north rim of that clove. And the Blue Trail, I bet many of you have been on the Blue Trail, and you have hiked this road, this path, and this is something many of you have stood upon. This is called Sunset Rock, the Sunset Rock that overlooks Catskill Clove. Now, your eyes have just been trained, and if you look in the foreground, bingo, what do you see? You see a polished surface. I see some people smiling there. Yeah, you're getting this, aren't you? You're seeing a polished surface, and you're seeing the glacial striations. You're witnessing the Catskill Clove Glacier advancing westward, rising up the clove, and it's scouring the surface at the edge of the rim. But there's something more in this picture, and I think I'm going to go forward. one a notch and talk about what we call scour and pluck. When the glacier passes across bedrock, it scours the upstream end, but when it gets to the downstream end, it behaves differently. The ice adheres to the bedrock, it sticks to the bedrock. The bedrock doesn't want to move, but the glacier does. The glacier does move, in this case from left to right, and it yanks rock out of the ground and it creates cliffs. And here's one of the best examples you're going to see anywhere in the Shangung Mountains of the Hudson Valley. Many of you have been to Lake Minnewaska State Park, and you've seen Gertrude's Nose. And this is the glacier passing from the left to the right. It stuck to that mass of rock that used to be right here and yanked it out of the ground. It stuck to this mass of rock and was all set to yank it out of the ground. When the climate warmed up, the glacier melted, and that tug came to an end. Now let's go back to Sunset Rock. We see that there is a scoured surface, a striated surface, and the glacier moving up the Clove has yanked rock out of the ground and created a cliff. We're going to go right here for our next picture, and that is looking at Sunset Rock from a different angle, from the angle I just gave you. And there's a man standing upon the scoured surface, and there is a beautiful view of the cliff that was created by the ice moving up the Clove from the left to the right. Scour and pluck topography. Well, Sanford Robinson Gifford got there in the 1850s, and he painted Sunset Rock from that very spot. Look at this. I love to do this. I love to do this. The man is still there. He's been there for 160 years. We talked with him. He remembers Sanford Robinson Gifford, and he's a little bit bigger than he was back in the 1850s. If you paint a man smaller on the cliff, it makes the cliff look bigger than it really was. We've caught Sanford Robinson Gifford cheating. Okay, let's go back and follow the striations once again. They're going to pass across Catskill Falls. They're going to reach South Lake. And they're going to get to this spot. They have scoured out the basin. South Lake did not exist before the Ice Age. It was scoured out by the glaciers of the Ice Age that we just witnessed. There is Round Top Mountain in the distance. And here's Thomas Cole painting from exactly the same spot and getting Round Top into his view of South Lake. He called this Lake with Dead Trees. Painted in 1825, this is regarded as one of the very first paintings of the Hudson River School of Art. That makes it important. It never would have been painted except that the glaciers got there long before Thomas Cole did. Well, overall, the North Lake, South Mountain vicinity, as you can see, has been intensely glaciated. That's central to our argument. The intense glaciation of this vicinity has created magnificent landscape. That landscape is what inspired the early artists of the Hudson River School.
Now, this is a view from another place called Sunset Rock. There are two of them in the Catskills, and this one is north of North Lake, and you can see the beautiful vista of North and South Lake below. If you haven't been there, you should try and go. It is spectacular. Almost all of the Hudson Valley artists went there, and Thomas Cole painted it. Oops. No, but in 1844, and Jasper Cropsey in 1855, and our favorite, Sanford Robinson Gifford, in 1862. It's partially our favorite because you can see the panoramic view from the Catskill front into the Hudson Valley. And we like to say, no glaciers,
No glaciers,
then no paintings.
no paintings. Well, I want you to go back and look up into the sky, those 5,000 feet again. I want you to fill the Hudson Valley with ice. I want you to watch it expanding across all of the Catskills, all of the Taconics, all of the Berkshire Mountains. It was big. It was a lot of ice. And you know what happened to it? The climate warmed up and it all melted, and all of that ice turned into meltwater. And all of that meltwater had to go somewhere. It flowed down into the bottom of the Hudson Valley and off to the Atlantic Ocean. But on its way, great raging, foaming, pounding, thundering torrents of water eroded the landscape. You see, what we've described is erosion of the landscape by advancing ice, and now we're describing erosion of the landscape by the meltwater flows of melting and retreating glaciers. All of it concentrated in the Catskills, but especially concentrated in the South Mountain area, and especially in Catskill Clove itself. There's one spot at the southeast corner of the Clove where, if you're really healthy and fit, the way we used to be, you can climb up there and stand on this ledge. It's called Poet's Ledge. And you can gaze to the west and you can see the entire Clove from there. It's the best view of the Clove that you can obtain. Don't try to go there unless you're really fit. It's a very rugged, very difficult hike. But boy, oh boy, is it worth the effort. And you have to think that in the 19th century, artists looked up at that ledge. You used to be able to see it from the ground, from the bottom of the canyon. And somebody must have said, I'm going up there and I'm going to paint the view that I can get from up there. And that somebody was, again, our favorite artist of the School of Art, Sanford Robinson Gifford. In 1861, he climbed up there with a sketch pad and he sketched Catskill Clove. And he turned that sketch into this painting. And it's a wonderful painting, but we've caught Sanford Robinson Gifford cheating once again, because you see what? He's painted a waterfall at the edge of Poet's Ledge, and there is no waterfall there. Furthermore, he's painted a floodplain at the bottom of Catskill Clove, and he's painted a river meandering back and forth across that floodplain, and there are no such things. Nope. I want you to look, Catskill Clove as it is, and Catskill Clove as Sanford Robinson Gifford painted it. It doesn't match. Now, we've explored up there, and about a third of a mile off to the west, we found another ledge, and at that other ledge, we have a waterfall. He painted a waterfall somewhere else, and he brought it and put it in his painting. Gifford decided to paint nature not as it was, but as he would have liked it to be. We're catching him cheating, but is it really cheating? Gifford was not a photographer. He was an artist, and he was not in the business of making images. He was in the business of creating images, creating great artistic images. His art is better than nature itself. Well, oh, excuse me, Professor Titus, how did we go from Catskill Clove to Niagara Falls? And why did we go from Catskill Clove to Niagara Falls? Isn't this about the Catskills and the Hudson Valley? And quite right, you are. I'm glad you asked that question because I have a little explaining to do. Look, there's dates. In 1678, this is where Niagara Falls was located. It was painted back then. You can look at the painting. In 1764, it was painted once again, and we can find that this 100 years later, it had retreated. By 1819, it had retreated quite a bit more. By 1842, somebody photographed the falls. We know where it was in that year, and we can put in a dashed line, and we can document the fact that Niagara Falls has been retreated. But why have we made the 1857 line red? What's special about that one? And it's special because that's the year that Frederick Church arrived. And that's the year that Frederick Church decided to paint Niagara Falls. And one of the most magnificent paintings ever done, ever. Among all paintings, not of the Hudson River School, but of all paintings. If you've ever had a chance to see this, and if you've ever been able to get up close to it and look into this painting, you will quickly agree with that assessment. It is a magnificent painting of a retreating waterfall. It's now retreated from where it was then. You couldn't paint his painting today. So, what does that have to do with the Catskills? And maybe you're guessing. And if you guessed Catskill Falls, you guessed correctly. Catskill Falls is at the end of a long canyon, just like Niagara Falls. And Catskill Falls is a product of post-Ice Age glacier waterfall retreat.
This is Catskill Falls on the morning that we first visited it. In a beautiful, misty fall morning, I think it was.
It was late fall.
And the way that Thomas Cole painted it in 1825 when he first came to the Catskills. And once again, whoops. Our favorite, Sanford Robinson Gifford, and he painted the whole canyon where the falls had retreated from, with the falls almost in the background. And this is the top of Catskill Falls today, and there's a brand new trail to it that's very easy to get to. And we encourage you, if you haven't been there for a while, to go and see the new trail and the overlook that was built there. And this is the top of Catskill Falls, as Cole saw it in 1825. You know, he can go back and forth, so I can go back and forth.
Hey, this is my joke.
That's today, that was then. Today and then.
We searched around at the top of Catskill Falls, and we actually found a bench of bedrock where Cole sat and did his sketch. And we took turns sitting there. And what a thrill it was to occupy the very space that Thomas Cole had occupied when he made this very fine painting. But let's go back to Catskill Clove, the bottom of it, at a location called Fawn's Leap, which many of you have probably been to. And there are several big boulders lying there. And so what? Ho hum, who cares? Why are boulders important? They are called glacial erratics. Those boulders haven't always been there. Those boulders were brought to that location when the Hudson Valley Glacier was rising up Catskill Clove. Late in the Ice Age, the last advance of the ice got exactly this far. It bulldozed those boulders to that spot, And then the climate warmed up, the ice melted, and those boulders were left behind until Harriet Caney Peel arrived in 1858 and painted them. Here I go again. Oops. Well, if you're from the Hudson Valley, if you spent much time, you've probably been on top of the Shungunk Mountains, and perhaps you've seen Patterson's Pellet. Pellet is exactly the wrong word to describe this boulder, but it's a glacial erratic perched on the edge of a cliff very close to Gertrude's nose. We want you to remember for the rest of your life that whenever you see a boulder of this size anywhere in the Catskills or the Hudson Valley or all across northern North America, it is almost certainly the case that that boulder was bulldozed to where you see it by the advancing glaciers of the last ice age.
Now we'd like to take you to the third school that we'd like to talk about. The school, if you will, of landscape architecture. In the 19th century, the Hudson Valley was the place where American landscape architecture first developed. Its early practitioners worked with the valley's scenic landscapes to develop what are called planned views. With inspiration provided by nature, trees were planted or cut down, roads were carefully planned, and homes were positioned to maximize their views. A planned view was a remarkable image, as we see here at Frederick Church's home, Olana. You can see the landscape framing and enhancing his view of the house. And his lake is a lake that he produced also, so that's kind of a planned view also from his property. And this is from the south porch of Olana from the house. And it is a really spectacular view of the Catskill front. Okay. Other notable landscape architects include Andrew Jackson Downing, and we lost him early on. He was on a steamboat coming back up to the Catskills to work, and the steamboat caught on fire and exploded and took his life. And Alexander Jackson Davis, an older Frederick Church who did a lot of planned landscape on his property. And Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux. Calvert Vaux was the principal architect of land views throughout the Hudson Valley. Together, they designed most of the urban parks in the Northeast, including Central Park in New York City, built from 1858 to 1876. And that might be considered to have the highest concentration of planned views ever. If you walk through Central Park, the different scenes that you see, the meadows, the trickling waterfalls, the brooks, the bridges, those were all planned. They were not one of them there when Central Park was planned. We'd like to take you down the Hudson Valley, and we apologize that our trip is going to be mostly on the east side of the Hudson Valley. There are planned views on both sides, but unfortunately, most of the planned views that are there today still on the west side of the Hudson are in private hands. So we can't ask people to go and look at them. It would be an invasion of privacy. So we're looking at the public houses of the east side of the Hudson River.
So what do glaciers have to do with landscape architecture? Well, as was the case with the art, it was the glaciers that created the landscape that the artists found so inspiring. What on earth could a glacier do to landscape that would inspire an architect, for crying out loud? I've got another thing here which is difficult to prove, but I'm going to try. This is a satellite image of Church Hill, and the church mansion was located right there at the arrow. But look to the northeast at Mount Marino, and this is the most remarkable hill. It's composed of bedrock. There's a crest running down the center of it, northeast to southwest, steep slope left and right. The northeast slope is steeper than the dragged out southeast slope, and it's sculpted. It's been turned into this very recognizable shape. Church Hill is similar. There's a crest, there's steep slopes. Church Hill is not quite as sculpted as Mount Marino. The landscape has been sculpted by the passage of the ice from the northeast to the southwest. And Frederick Church took command of this landscape and used it in planning the landscape architecture of his estate. Now, there's one other thing, big thing, that the glaciers did to the Hudson Valley, and that occurred when those glaciers melted. Remember, 5,000 feet above you was ice, a mile into the sky was all ice, and it melted. Good grief, there must have been a lot of water. A lot of water doesn't begin to describe it. So much water that the lower Hudson Valley flooded. A single Great Lake came into existence, which would remind you very much of Lake Champlain, which is another glacial lake, which is still in existence. This one is called Glacial Lake Albany, and here's Albany in Albany County. And you probably never noticed it before when you've been to Albany, but the city is flat. It doesn't remind you of San Francisco. There aren't any ups and downs. They don't have cable cars in Albany. They don't need them in Albany. It's flat because Albany lies at the bottom of Glacial Lake Glacial Lake Albany, and the bottoms of lakes are flat. They're filled in with sediment, mostly silt, and so they end up being flat. There is a lot of flat landscape in the lower Hudson Valley, and from now on, for the rest of your lives, when you're driving on the thruway through the Hudson Valley, we'd like you to take notice. Every time you look left and right and you see flat landscape, and we want you to remember that there's a very good chance that you're looking at the bottom of a lake. It's a perspective which you probably never had before, but it will change your sense of reality when you're traveling in the lower Hudson Valley. Now, the lake deposits fill the lower parts of the Hudson Valley. The Hudson River eroded into those lake deposits, and when it did that, it created a platform on the east side of the valley, another platform on the west side of the valley. And when the architects came along, they realized that they had no understanding of how that platform got there, but they knew that if they built a house on the edge of the platform, it would have a magnificent view of the Hudson Valley. And so that is where the glaciers influenced the architects. It created the platform which was so inspiring to those artists, those architects.
This is Claremont, the state historical site of the Livingstons. And it is on the top, the bottom of the lake. And this is a planned view from Claremont overlooking the Hudson and the Catskill Mountains. This is Montgomery Place, a little bit further south. It now belongs to Bard College, but you are allowed to go and peruse the grounds during the daylight hours. And this is part of the mansion, and you can sit up there and have a nice picnic lunch. And take a look at another of the plan views from Montgomery Place. And that was Calvert Fox who did that. And Wilderstein, further yet down the Hudson River Valley. And this was also a landscape that was done by Calvert Fox. And it is also, you can see on the flat lake bottom.
Well, if you had a good earth science course in high school, or maybe you took a earth science or geology course in college, there's a real good chance you learned about deltas. And if so, it would have been explained to you at the bottom of the delta sequence are flat-lying sediments. There are flat-lying sediments at the top of a delta sequence, and there are steeply sloping strata of sediment in between. But basically, the important thing is the top of the delta is another almost flat platform. Here's the edge of the platform. When rivers flowed into Glacial Lake Albany, they carried sediment with them. They deposited that sediment on these steeply sloping strata, and they created the cross-section of a delta, which had a platform at its very edge. And here's another view of that. This is Glacial Lake Albany as it was. This is the top of the delta, and here is a platform which the landscape architects could take advantage of, could position houses on it. And once again, these houses would be afforded beautiful views looking westward into or towards the Hudson River, into the Hudson Valley, and beyond to the Wall of Manitou, the Catskill front in the far distance. The biggest delta in the Hudson Valley is the Hyde Park Delta. A stream called Crum Elbow Creek flowed from the northeast into the valley into the Lake Albany. This line is the eastern shore of Lake Albany. The sediment carried by Crum Elbow Creek was deposited to create this delta, the Hyde Park Delta. Now, the problem is, when you get there, you find that Crum Elbow Creek has been changed. The direction has been changed. It flows off to the northwest, where it enters the modern Hudson River. We had a problem. The delta here is at 180 feet. The delta there is at 170 feet. This is the Vanderbilt Mansion. This is the Roosevelt Mansion. This is the Roosevelt Delta. And this is a 10-foot lower Vanderbilt Delta. Discovery. When we go to the Wallace Center frequently at the Roosevelt Library. And when you go out the front door of the Wallace Center and cross the road, you find a shallow canyon, a dry river channel, which tells us where Crum Elbow Creek used to be when it flowed into Lake Albany. And after the water dropped 10 feet, it carved this canyon and then was diverted. Well, that's a lot of science, delta science, but the long and the short of it is that we have something called the Hyde Park Delta, yellow and brown, and we make a remarkable discovery. Hyde Park is a town which not only has a delta, but Hyde Park is a delta. The entire town of Hyde Park is plastered onto the tops of these two deltas. Hyde Park is an Ice Age delta, and like all other deltas flowing into Lake Albany, there is a platform at the edge, a platform where houses can be positioned.
So that's the Vanderbilt Mansion on the edge of the delta. And the views and landscape and gardens were done by Charles Platt. And a planned view from the top of the delta at the Vanderbilt Mansion. And this is Springwood, FDR's home on the top of the delta. And this is the view today that you see when you sit there And you can see it's not very scenic. It's really been overgrown. You can no longer see the river or anything beyond, really. So we went to the archives of the FDR library, and we were very lucky. We found the original rendering of what that view was supposed to be. So that's the original Springwood. On the west side, the nearby Shwangunk Mountains, although not formed of the same sedimentary rock as the Catskills, also exhibit most of the geological features associated with the Ice Age that we've mentioned today. There is extensive scour and pluck. Gertrude's Nose is a wonderful example of that. And in many places along the trails, and even in at least one parking lot that we found, there are examples of polishing and striations. And there are also lots of erratics along the trails, like Patterson's Pellet. The black dirt region was formed by sediments of a glacial lake and the wetlands left behind when it drained. And they are all out there just waiting for you to discover. This is the view down the Hudson Valley from the bell tower at Olana. And we hope that from today on, you'll look at the Hudson Valley the way that we've come to know it, as a gift of the Ice Age. We thank you for listening, and we'd be happy to try and answer any questions that you might have. We can't hear them clapping.
I'll clap for you. Yes. Yeah, that was amazing, amazingly informative. I learned a lot about the geology of the Hudson Valley. And I almost forgot about the glacial Lake Albany, that it was there. And this weekend while I'm driving up that way, I'm totally going to imagine that as I'm driving along the thruway. I am going to look at the Hudson Valley differently now.
Excellent.
We want you to put a barbecue skewer in the back of your car. And whenever you think you're looking at the bottom of a lake, pull over, get out, and push the barbecue skewer into the ground. Now, almost everywhere you do that, it goes in an inch and hits a rock. But if you're on the bottom of a glacial lake, it's all silt, it will smoothly and easily slide into the earth. It's a scientific equipment that we use to identify the bottoms of Ice Age lakes. And we do this all the time.
It's very scientific.
Very scientific.
Yes, the barbecue skewer of science tool that you use. Yes.
Yep.
Thank you very much. I was just hiking out to Gertrude's Nose today, and when we were heading back, we stopped at Patterson's Pellet, and one of my fellow hikers said, "Does anybody know the story about Patterson's Pellet?" And we all had to say, "No." Well, we can go home and Google it.
Hey, now you
So
know.
perfect timing.
You're going to look so smart the next time.
Thank you so much.
This is a lot better than Google.
Did you discuss why the Manitou Wall is named the Manitou Wall? How it got its name? The Wall of Manitou, whatever.
It's Manitou, I think, is the Native American god that it's named
A
after.
spirit, a god,
Yeah.
a deity.
Well, I did share your Facebook, which you have right there, and your blog in the chat, and it's also listed right there. So I encourage everyone to check out both of those. And of course, you are prolific writers. So there are some books out there as well to further your knowledge of the Hudson Valley. And I love the connection of science and art that you presented today. So I'm going to definitely look at all those paintings differently and look at the Hudson Valley differently too.
Those are two areas that we love, and we've been blessed to live in an area where there's the richness of geology and of art. So
Yeah.
better for it.
It's great. I don't know if you've been to Westchester and South Salem, but we have a huge glacial boulder in front of our house that is almost bigger than our house. And the town we live in is just strewn with huge glacial boulders.
We grew up in a
Salem.
town in northern New Jersey,
Okay.
and the next town over, which was only feet from where we were, there is a rock like you've described. It's as big as a house, and the town is called Glen Rock. And the road actually splits around the rock.
Oh,
So you
wow.
can go one side or the other. And he used to have his paper route around the rock. So he used to ride his bike around the rock every day.
6
And-
days a week.
And people ask us why we're so enamored of the Ice Age, and that's kind of why we grew up with it in our
Yeah.
face.
And then another thing, that Route 22 up in between Putnam and Dutchess, that's got to be a glacial lake. After you said all this, it made me. It's all completely flat,
Yeah.
you know, with the
There
hills
there
on
are
either
lots
side.
of smaller glacial lakes that were there for a while and then drained. There are some that are still wetlands today.
And they're filled with mastodons.
If the Black Dirt region, I don't know if you're familiar with the Black Dirt
Yeah,
region,
I get
but
produce from a farm at a
if-
farm
if
market.
they hadn't drained that, actively drained it, it would still be a kind of swamp.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, they drained it because people were getting diseases from the mosquitoes that were there
Oh,
way back in the 1800s.
that's the region they grow a lot of vegetables there.
Oh
'Cause
yeah,
there's the
onions
farm.
and stuff, because there's a lot of sulfur in the soil.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to Rosendale? There's a giant ledge right off
Yeah.
the rail trail, and
Yeah.
there's these enormous boulders. Now that's also the part that's been just dumped from the glacier, correct?
Yeah, by the caves in Rosendale.
Yeah.
No, this is off the rail trail,
Right.
about maybe half a mile off the rail trail heading into New Paltz. There's a trail that goes up. It's called the Lime Kiln Trail, and it's with these enormous rocks.
Mm.
I have to go
Well, I
there.
don't think we've been on that trail.
Yeah.
The big
This
story
is-
that we wrote
it's-
about in Rosendale is
Yeah,
that the
it's-
canyon there cuts through bedrock, and it's a meltwater canyon. It's immediately post-glacial. All that meltwater was pouring down the creek, and it eroded the canyon that you see at Rosendale.
Okay. Yeah, this is now part of the preserve. I
Mhm.
think 2011, the preserve purchased it, and it goes right off the rail trail.
Yep.
I was
Yes,
just
go
up there
off
the
there.
other day. It was quite something to say, because it's all flat, and then all of a sudden there are these enormous boulders. They're not even boulders, they're walls of rock.
Mhm.
When my husband and I first got together, I had been at Vassar College geology major, so class of '87, and I took him to all those places that we took field trips to. Rosendale was one of them. We both have been there because those were the coolest places. All, you know, within a short drive from Vassar.
Yeah, the cement mines.
Yeah.
Right.
really
And right
cool.
along the creek, because I live right along the creek in Rosendale, you can see the fossils right in the rock, right
Yeah,
at the
it's beautiful.
bed there. Well, thank you. This is fabulous. I have your book, The Glacial Age. I got it in Olana, and I said, "Oh, I'm reading this." And there's also another one that I'm reading. It's all about all of the artists of the Hudson River Valley. It's a new one also.
Mhm.
Fabulous. I love your talk.
We love them, and we love Olana. We're there all the time.
Right, right.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna have to read your books. I haven't read any of them yet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, both of you, for this evening's presentation. It was fabulous. Again, this is being recorded, so I will have this up. I will share the link with everyone who's registered it will also be on our website, our YouTube channel. So,
And we
yeah.
apologize for the glitches.
Oh, hey, technology is our friend and our foe all at once.
Right.
So,
I'm a teacher of 6th graders and they have to wait for me while I, what is this? And it's exactly the same thing.
yep, we've all been there. So no worries. Well, thank you both, and thank you everyone for attending. As I said, I'll send out the link to everyone.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you.
Good
Thank
night,
you so
folks.
much.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Night.